This is OneSoccer Direct. It's Mackenzie Barwell joined by Ollie Platt and Jordan Wilson. Jordo, this is the first time I'm on the show. You just said it. Maybe you guys should be welcoming me inside.
We should have
planned something.
Mac,
exactly.
Look at that. We should have.
Balloons, usually, confetti.
Yeah, there's been times I played the recorder for Wheels on his birthday. Ollie's gotten a chest bump. We should have done something for you, but we're busy. So next time
guys.
when you host again, we'll do something.
Yeah, it's the first, but it won't be the last. We've got a few things to get into today, but first, women's national team last night, they took on the U.S. in what many consider their most important match of the year, right? No major tournaments, no trophies, so it's a chance to test themselves really against the best in the world, but ultimately, as we know, they fell short. Before the match, though, Casey Stoneys spoke about how excited, motivated, and fearless her side was, but in the end, Canadians were thoroughly dominated and lost 3-0 to their rivals. So we're going to get into the ins and outs of this game, but first we want to share with you how Casey Stoney reacted after the match.
Yeah, I think obviously bitterly disappointing. He said, "I'll look at me first, but then we need to take collective accountability." It was not good enough, unacceptable, under par. We looked short, a yard short on everything. We gave the ball away, we turned the ball over. We allowed them to score from 2 set pieces, win first contacts, win second balls. You want to try and win a major tournament, we've got a lot to learn and we've got to learn fast. We've got till October now. My message was get fit, get better on the ball, because otherwise, we're not going to give ourselves a chance. So yeah, I'm bitterly disappointed. The players are bitterly disappointed, but it's for me. There's no excuse for that performance.
I spoke with Vanessa earlier. She emphasized a chance to reflect, a chance to learn, and a chance to apply those lessons in the fall windows. What do you hope this team has to learn and can apply in the coming months?
Yeah, I think reflection is important. Action is more important. We need players that are going to start playing for their teams. We've got too many players not playing significant minutes, and it shows. Obviously, I had a few players out there tonight that are out of season. Reflect on their own personal performances. Are they fit enough? Are they keeping the ball well enough? Are they moving for their teammates? Do they have enough desire to win duels? I think when it's not your night, the least you can do is work hard. And that was a disappointing thing tonight.
So she didn't mince her words, right, Casey? Tell us how you really feel. Ollie, I want to start with you. Did the results surprise you, or what are your thoughts? What went wrong here?
Not really, to be honest with you. I think her reaction is merited. They were a long way off their opponent, and that's not the US A team. That's the B team or maybe the C team with a sprinkling of some of the biggest stars in there, with the likes of Rose Lavelle, obviously, who was the best player on the field, and Canada's not strongest 11, given they've got some injuries themselves, but I think much closer to it than the Americans. Looked a million miles away, to be frank. I think if you've watched this team this year, there's been some decent performances against weaker opponents, but probably not a whole lot, to be honest, to suggest that they were going to be ready to really take this game to the Americans on American soil and potentially win it. But I do think it was probably worse than most people expected, and certainly the Canadians would have been hoping. 30 seconds into this game, they were carved open, basically, and didn't lead to a chance because of a misplaced pass, but very easily could have. 5 minutes in, there was a grade A chance for the US, same situation, playing out the back, just couldn't really seem to find any solutions to stop them progressing the ball up the field. And that was kind of the story of the game for me, was that the modern game, so much of it is about pressing, both in terms of how you press and then how the opposition presses you and you play around it. And in those two areas, Canada just were a long way off good enough in this game. Their press was ineffective. It was constantly played through. And in terms of their ability to build the game and play out the back and construct chances themselves, too often they were forced to go long, forced into misplaced passes, didn't really get any fluency going. So it was a really tough night, and we'll get onto it. But I think some big questions now for this team and for Casey Stoney to figure out.
Jordan, you were watching this one in studio, and Ollie kind of got to what I wanted to say here. Even just 30 seconds in, right? You can see how aggressive the Americans are, closing down the Canadians in possession. Watching within the first 10 minutes, let's say, did you feel there was a sense of almost inevitability with how this game unfolded?
Not in the beginning. Great question, but not in the beginning. I thought Canada seemed a bit lively. I seemed like they tried to do that press, but I think the question I had around the 15th minute is that sustainable? Like, is that the way to really go forward? And then I think also the Americans found some gaps. They found some joy down that right-hand side specifically. Thought Cooper was electric in the first half for them. And it just seemed to be some openings that they took advantage of. But I just want to quickly, like, I think it's so telling with managers when they go after a match and they talk to a reporter and you hear the sound bites and the presser. Like, she said, disappointing. You want to see collective accountability. It was under par. Set pieces were poor. They were far off from their standard. There's a lot to learn. And if it's a bad day at the office, essentially, there's no excuse not to work hard. Like, if my manager's saying that to me or my teammates at the end of a match, that has to be a wake-up call. That means no one's safe. That means she's looking for a response that says, hey, I want to play for this national team. I want to play for this program. And I want to make sure that desire is present every time I'm there. I will say, if you're going to play the Americans, probably the biggest thing that was missing is that the Canadians didn't have the legs or the physicality to really compete. That's what it comes down to. We can talk about set pieces and all that, but if you don't have the legs to actually run the 10K, the 11K, whatever you have to do to press well, I think it's going to be a tough day. But I love the core that Stoney is stringing by saying it has to come down to desire. It has to come down to wanting it more than your opponent, because it's true. Then you can build off of that. So it's a hard lesson, a bitter pill to swallow, but I'm just hoping that that's a lesson learned. And now that when this team gets together, they can move forward collectively, because there's some talented players in this group, but what are talented players if a unit doesn't work together?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, Jordan. You heard it in the interview with Kaylin Sheridan. Like, nobody's spot has really been solidified to the point where Casey hasn't been, rotating younger players in, right? So, yeah, they still have some performing, I think, and impressing to do to her. If last night's game was a measuring stick, as many were calling it, where would you say this women's national team currently stands? And I think, as we've already alluded to, what might be keeping them from being a top-ranked team? Ollie?
Well, the measure is that they're a long way off right now. I think Casey Stoney's had 6 months, obviously, to kind of basically assess everything, right? Assess the players. She's brought in a lot of new players, see them against some weaker opponents and in training sessions, and now see them in a game against the kind of team that you're going to need to compete against if you're going to make any noise at a World Cup. And clearly right now they're a long way off. So I think she's got to have a real think after this game and, start putting into practice kind of the way forward and the vision after this in terms of who are the players you're going to build around based on what you've seen over the past few months. What is the style of play going to be? Because I don't think it's particularly defined right now with Canada. And how do you get this team to a place over the next couple of years where they can truly compete at a World Cup? And that's the luxury they've got, is that they've got a lot of time to implement that. But I think it has to start now in terms of putting those pieces into place. I think this team is kind of like the men. They want to play an up-tempo style. They want to press. They want to add a bit more dynamism and physicality to their game. You saw in the interviews, she referenced that quite a lot, things like fitness and the tempo of the team. The question is, can they get there to a level that teams like the United States have got to, who I think in that area seem a lot more naturally talented in terms of having pacey players and really athletic players, or do they need to adapt that a little bit now? So those are questions I don't know that anyone really has the answer to, the morning after the game, but those are the questions that I think Casey Stoney is going to have to get to grips with and answer in the coming months.
Jordan?
I totally agree. I think too, obviously, we talk about talented players in the women's national program, and there are. And you think about the depth pool, I think that increased. Like, there's some feel good stories. You look at a Holly Ward, it's beautiful that the NSL has come. A player can play in it, and now is representing her country. Like, we always talk about, even in my personal story, just like you have to go so far to try to come back home and play. It's so nice that that's happening. But I look at this team, and specifically yesterday, and maybe I'm being harsh because of some injuries, but the fact still remains, at the end of the match, you look at difference makers. Like, who on the pitch you're like, who would the other team want to swap jerseys with? Who is the other player on the team that they were like, hey, you're Canadian, but we'd love for you to be American on the day? There are a group of Americans that I would love to have on the Canadian team, and I can't really say the same, and I think that needs to be shown. So when I break that down, it comes to who's a threat? who's a goal scoring machine, who's someone that can create and make sure that chances are created for your squad. And then I think Canada's success has always been defensively. So what's the best lineup? Like, how are you going to make sure that you can keep the Americans at bay? And we look at the set pieces that we're giving away. I think that comes down to like lack of urgency, but also leadership. So it is one match, and not like no love is lost, because it's obviously not a crash out in a tournament. But I just think these things need to be in place. Like, I know you don't have Olivia Smith. I know Kadisha Buchanan's coming back. I know like Chloe Lacasse. Like, it wasn't the strongest team. However, it wasn't the Americans either, but there's still difference makers on the day. And I think that needs to be present for Canada moving forward.
I like that you point out those like heartwarming stories, right? Because this one result isn't the end of the world. We saw their success against teams like Costa Rica and Haiti. And I think we also saw that younger talent pool stand out. You pointed out Holly Ward, but also Zara Chavoshi, Annabelle Chukwu. Like, when you guys think about the potential, I guess, of that next generation, or one that seems to be stepping in right now, what excites you there?
I think that's like a really important question, I think, because they've got to, again, like, make some big decisions here about how they're going to go forwards, because I think of the kind of senior generation of players that they have right now, the only one who's been consistently impactful in terms of attacking players against this type of opponent is Adriana Leon, and she didn't play at all last night and is 32 years old now. I still think she's going to have a big role to play likely in 2027, but clearly it's, you know, not an up-and-coming player anymore. So, you know, how much do you start to entrust the likes of Ward and Chukwu? Ward has been their best player over the past few games in terms of an attacking player. She's much less experienced than a lot of the others around her, but I think it's been a while now where you've been looking at some of these players hoping they're going to take that next step against the top opponents. Some of them are still relatively young, and maybe they will, like a Jordan Heitmer, but it's not really happened. And even working in some of the players who aren't necessarily young but didn't have much of a or as big a role under Bev Priestman, the likes of Mimi Aladu and Evelyn Vienne, I don't know that they've really made a persuasive case that they're going to transform this team either. So do you have to take a risk and go young now, or do you continue to persevere with kind of that core group of attacking players that we've seen for the past 4 or 5 years? Yeah.
Jordan, do you have any thoughts on this?
To be honest, I have many thoughts, but I don't want to ramble. So I would love maybe a more pointed, because Ollie did a great job. It's just a more pointed question. Because one thing I didn't mention what I wanted to say before is that when you look at like the top 5 teams, FIFA rankings, like the US, Spain, and Germany, England, like Brazil, they're difference makers that I was just harping on before. And like that's kind of the thing that I think is missing. And just looking at Stoney, this is not something that she said. This is just, I was like, read body language and tell signs, is like, who are the players to like step up now in a big game? And I just wonder, Ollie, Mac, like how you guys feel if maybe even like tweaking how you play against better teams, like maybe the Costa Ricas and Haitis and Argentinas to some degree you can get by with playing a high tempo type of way. But I just wonder with this side, with the makeup of the Canadian team and how they kind of ran out of legs yesterday.
Yeah,
I just wonder if Stoney is thinking, okay, when I'm playing a top opponent, do I just maybe switch up how I want to attack and how I want to play the game? Because maybe the team doesn't have the same quality as the Americans. It's a tough spot to be in right now, because as a manager, you're always thinking, like, what do you do to continue to push this side? But I just wonder with the makeup of the team, like, where Stoney's head's at with what she wants to do moving forward.
Yeah, she could very well be thinking that. Sorry, Ollie. I was just going to say we're still only 6 months into her management. So, yeah, it's all growing pains, I think. Given this is her first test against the Americans, and she's still experiencing this team and the highs and lows of it, what, Ollie, I'll go back to you, in your mind has gone right? And maybe apart from this loss to the Americans, what might she be thinking is not as ideal or going wrong?
Well, I'll start with what's gone right. I think she's given opportunities to a lot more different players. 35, I think it is this year now, compared to 30 in the entirety of 2024. So that's been a big difference. I think more opportunities, more players coming into the program and deepening the player pool. And I think they've had some success there. There's players that have come in that look like they can play a part going forwards. The big thing I think she'll be most kind of concerned about or disappointed they haven't made more progress on is the attack, because she came into this job talking about unlocking the front line and changed the formation to start with to play with 2 strikers. They've already abandoned that and moved back to a single forward, and just nothing really has clicked. So she's having some of the same issues, I think, as Bev Priestman in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
What's gone right? Obviously, the player pool. I also think that, like, with all these matches that have happened and all these players that she's been able to see, you can see who you can trust. Like, I think you look at Emma Regan. Okay, was it a game like yesterday where it's so open and you're late to press and there's a lot of running to do? Is that a defensive midfielder's dream? Absolutely not. For me, I still have PTSD and nightmares of the games where you're just chasing numbers.
Right.
And you're trying to get close to someone and you can't. But I think through this process, through Stoneys' tenure over the past 6 months, there are players that she could put on the game sheet. The biggest thing that I think maybe has gone wrong, but it was like you kind of expected, was the chopping and changing as well, is that there wasn't much consistency, so you couldn't really build off of those performances. And I just wonder, with everyone back, if Stoneys' ideal, I know she spoke to us about playing 2 up top, and Ollie just mentioned that she kind of abandoned that, went to 1. But I also just think when I look at this Canadian women's national team, like, history, it's been about being solid defensively through the midfield, and then maybe you can get some joy going forward. But they're not a team historically that goes and, like, scores 3 goals against a top 10 opponent. Like, they just defend as a unit. They defend with their lives, and then they break and go forward. So I'm wondering if she just boisters that defense. I'm wondering if that she goes back to a 3, or the women go back to playing a 3. Specifically, you're looking at a Jade Rose, if Buchanan is back, or Vanessa Gilles. Like, who do you keep on the bench? Just really having a solid group. Maybe a Gabby Carl, and hopefully Lawrence can get back to her top playing ways. But just really bunkering in, and then having some players that you can gamble on and that can free up some things, like a Mimi Aladu, like Olivia Smith, like Sonus on the day, whoever it might be. I just wonder if she maybe changes philosophies a bit and starts thinking a bit more pragmatic as opposed to free-flowing, Ollie.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I mean...
Go ahead, Ollie.
Sorry, Mac. I would say, I don't know that you can win a tournament like that, but they literally did win a tournament like that, right? It's like, as strange as it was, and, you know, a lot of obviously penalty shootouts and so on, and in COVID and all of those different variables, but I think they've always had this, like, desire, multiple coaches now, to try and progress the way they play and be a little bit less just kind of defensively minded, and it's been really tough getting there, and it still is.
This is my first time hosting. You guys are trying to keep me off my timeline here. I'm trying to cut you off. That's why I'm interrupting left and right.
It's usually
shout over us.
Me and Ali are talking it today.
All right. Well, we really could talk about this forever, but that will wrap up this women's national window. And as we heard from Casey Stoney throughout our conversation, still a lot to learn. So we will see where they go from here.